There is a cable on your desk right now, or coiled beside your laptop, or disappearing into the wall behind your television. You have probably never thought about what it is made of because it has never given you a reason to. That cable is copper wire, and copper wire starts as rock, ordinary-looking gray-brown rock sitting in the ground somewhere, containing so little copper that if you picked up a piece and examined it, you would see nothing useful at all. Between that piece of rock and the cable on your desk is one of the stranger industrial journeys on Earth. It involves open pits big enough to see from space, blasts that fracture entire hillsides, and a sequence of processes that strip away everything the rock contains until only the copper remains. Let's get into it right here on Small Things. Rock with almost nothing inside. The reason you cannot simply melt copper ore and pour out the copper is that the copper is not loose inside the rock. It is chemically bonded to other elements, locked into mineral compounds like chalcopyrite, where copper atoms are bound to iron and sulfur. To release the copper, those bonds have to be broken, and breaking them requires chemistry, heat, electricity, or all three. A typical deposit contains between 0.5 and 1% copper by weight. For every 100 kilograms of ore, less than 1 kilogram is copper. The rest is silica, iron, sulfur, and other minerals that must be separated before the copper can be used. That separation is the entire challenge. Moving a mountain to find a metal. Finding a deposit worth mining takes years before a single hole is drilled. Geologists spend months in the field taking rock samples, measuring chemical traces in the soil, and mapping the ground below using seismic surveys and remote sensing. Most of what they look at is worthless. Only a fraction of deposits are concentrated enough to justify the extraordinary cost and disruption of opening a mine. The process of simply confirming that a deposit exists and is worth pursuing can itself cost hundreds of millions of dollars before a single ton of ore is moved. Most copper today comes from open-pit mines, enormous excavations cut into the surface of the earth in descending terraced rings. In northern Chile's Atacama Desert, the Chuquicamata mine is one of the largest holes humans have ever dug. It stretches for kilometers across the desert floor and descends hundreds of meters into the earth in terraced rings wide enough to drive a full-size truck along. From the rim looking down, the trucks at the bottom look like toy cars. The scale is something that photographs consistently fail to convey, because there is nothing at the bottom to compare them against except more of the mine. Getting to the ore requires moving vast quantities of rock that contains no copper at all. Giant drilling machines bore holes into the rock, each one roughly as deep as a 5-story building. Those holes are packed with explosives, then detonated in precise sequences timed to milliseconds, shattering millions of tons of rock in a single blast while keeping dust and ground movement controlled. Excavators move in afterward, scooping the broken rock into trucks that stand 7 meters tall and carry 400 tons in a single load, and less than 1% of that 400 tons is copper. Once the ore reaches the surface, it still looks exactly like rock. Because it is rock, there is no visible copper. There is no indication of what is inside. The trucks deliver it to a crusher, and from there, it enters a sequence of grinding stages, massive grinding mills, cylinders the size of apartment buildings filled with heavy steel balls, crush the ore into progressively finer particles until individual grains of copper mineral are physically separated from the surrounding stone and fine enough for chemistry to take over. 3 ways to remove everything that is not copper. At this point, the copper is free from the rock but still mixed with everything else that came out of the ground. The rest of the process is removal, done in 3 stages, each one stripping away more of what the copper is not. The first stage is flotation. Water, chemicals, and the ground rock are mixed into a slurry inside large tanks. Specific reagents are added that make copper mineral particles hydrophobic, meaning their surfaces become water-repelling, while the other minerals in the slurry remain water-attracting. Air is then blown through the slurry, creating millions of tiny bubbles. The copper particles, repelling the water, attach to those bubbles and rise to the surface with them, while the water-loving gangue minerals stay behind. Everything else, the unwanted minerals, stays behind in the water. The foam that rises is skimmed off, filtered, and dried into a copper concentrate, still only about 25 to 30% copper, but far richer than the ore that started the journey. The second stage is smelting. The concentrate goes into furnaces operating above 1,200 degrees Celsius, where impurities react with silica sand, added to the mix and separate into a layer of slag that floats on top of the molten copper. The slag is drawn off. The copper beneath is poured into rectangular molds and solidifies into thick plates called anodes. Fire has done what it can. The copper is now around 98 to 99% pure, but not pure enough for electrical wire, which needs better than 99.99%. The third stage is electrorefining, where electricity does what heat cannot. The copper anodes are suspended in large tanks filled with an electrolyte solution, with thin, pure copper sheets placed between them as targets. Electric current flows through the tank, pulling copper atoms off the anode and depositing them onto the pure sheet opposite. Impurities, including gold and silver from the ore, fall away and settle at the bottom rather than following the copper across. After about 2 weeks, the target sheets have grown into dense slabs of copper at 99.99% purity. The mine has disappeared from view. Most people handling a copper wire assume that somewhere along the process copper was found looking like copper, reddish, metallic, already distinct from its surroundings, waiting to be collected and shaped. That is almost exactly wrong. The copper that comes out of the ground looks like gray-brown rock. The copper concentrate that leaves the flotation tanks looks like dark sludge. The anode that leaves the smelter looks like a rough, dull plate. Even after 2 weeks in an electrorefining tank, the refined copper that emerges is a flat, unremarkable slab. The transformation from that slab to a wire is the final stage, and it is where the material finally starts to look like what it is. The refined copper is melted again and cast into a continuous bar, which then passes through a series of rolling mills that progressively squeeze it thinner and longer. What enters the rolling mill as a thick rectangular bar exits as a rod a few millimeters across, warm to the touch from the rolling pressure. That rod is then pulled through a series of progressively smaller dies, each one narrowing the copper a little further until it reaches the exact diameter the application needs, sometimes thinner than a human hair for fine electrical work. By the time a coil of copper wire leaves a factory, the Atacama Desert, the grinding mill, and the electrorefining tank have completely disappeared from view. Where the wire actually goes. A coil of copper wire leaving a manufacturing plant will not stay a coil for long. The wire is cut, insulated, bundled, and sent into the world in directions most people never consider. Some of it ends up inside the walls of houses under construction right now, carrying current from the breaker panel to every light switch, socket, and appliance in the building. Some becomes the winding inside an electric motor, in the motor driving a pump, a fan, a washing machine drum, or an electric car wheel. The winding is what creates the magnetic field that makes the motor turn, And without high-purity copper, that field is weaker and the motor less efficient. Some of it becomes the undersea cables that carry internet traffic between continents. A single undersea cable contains multiple copper conductors wrapped in insulation and armored against the pressure of deep water. The copper inside carries the signal from one shore to another, often crossing thousands of kilometers of ocean floor. And some of it runs inside the transformers that step electricity up or down before it reaches buildings, sitting on utility poles or buried in substations, connecting the power grid to everything it serves. The copper in those transformers has been there for decades in some cases, quietly doing the same job since the day it was installed, carrying current that has passed through it millions of times without wearing it away. Because pure copper does not degrade the way most materials do under repeated electrical stress. A purified piece of the earth. The wire is one of the most common objects in any building, and one of the least considered. It sits in the wall, runs across the floor, coils behind every device, and nobody thinks about it because it never needs to be thought about. It simply works. What makes it work is purity. Copper carries electricity well precisely because it has been stripped of almost everything it started with. The impurities that remained in the ore, in the concentrate, in the anode, were there at every stage and removed at every stage until what was left was clean enough to carry current without resistance, heat, or failure. Every copper wire is a piece of the earth that has been refined until it can carry modern life. That is what the wire is, even when it is invisible inside a wall. If this changed the way you look at the next wire you pick up, let us know in the comments what you want us to explore next. We might make it our next episode. Thanks for watching. History often hides in the smallest details.